I'd just like to welcome Marie Monks um, to thank her for talking to us and just giving us some insight what she would like to share with us. I'm sure that all the students appreciate this and really appreciate the time you're spending with us. And we are quite excited to hear what you've got to share with us. Among the students here, you may find one or two teachers as well, which are all IST teachers who are also just interested in, be a mixture of questions. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce Marie Monks and thank you again for sharing your expertise with us. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for that introduction and for making the time for me to come speak today. I'm really excited to get to share my experience with you all and to hear, I guess, what questions you all might have at the end, to hear what you are all doing. I really appreciate this opportunity. So thank you for getting this all set up. Everyone can see my slides hopefully on this other screen, but I'm just gonna get into it. Today I'll just be talking about my path in tech, how I ended up here as a software engineer. Let's see if I can get this going. What this isn't going to cover, this is not me speaking for my employer, Google, in any official capacity. This is not an official Google event. Now that we got that over with, we can get into the fun stuff. What I am going to cover today is how I ended up at my current role, sort of the path that I took to get here, what the day-to-day of being a software engineer is like, and any questions that you all might have. I'm mostly going to talk about, I guess, how I figured out that this is what I want to do, because I think our educational system does a great job preparing students for the many opportunities that will be presented to them in life. But those opportunities can often be overwhelming. It seems like there's so many options and it's hard to choose what the right one is. So this is just going to be about my one path, I guess, navigating through the educational system and beyond. But there are many ways through. Let's see. So what I currently do is I work as a software engineer on Google Maps on the Saved Places team. So if you'll see on this screen, there's these pins with hearts or squares. These are places that I have saved to lists of favorites or places I want to go or whatnot. And you can see sort of like my house. Please don't show up where I live. And you can sort of get a sense of, I guess, where someone thinks there are important places. I do both front end, back end work, testing, all of it. Some teams throughout the field will have you sort of specialize, but I'm grateful that the one I'm on lets me be more of a generalist in that sense. So that's what I am currently working on. My mom still calls it MapQuest, but this is, in fact, Google Maps. Back when I was in high school, I had nothing to do with computer science coding, had not taken a class. There was one offered at my school, but I didn't take it. I had no idea really what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go, didn't know where I wanted to go to school, was just really figuring things out. I enjoyed running track and cross country and doing sports, but beyond that, I didn't have any sort of a view of what I wanted to do. Towards the end of school, I thought I would study international relations, possibly, and I had liked Tufts, and so that's how I chose the school that I wanted to go to. And once I got there, still really did not know what I wanted to do. I switched my major twice, started off as international relations. Then I thought that I was going to be a doctor, and I started on a pre-med track, studying biopsychology and environmental studies. And that was okay. was not the ideal path for me. I'll get more into that later. But eventually, I found my way to computer science after 2 years of school. So all of you who have some coding experience are already leagues ahead of where I was when I was at your age. And I just say this because I find that a lot of times people talking about their path in life or how they became successful or whatnot tend to skim over the harder parts of getting there or the parts that were more of a detour rather than that straight line to success. And figuring out what you want to do, where you want to be, it's going to be messy. And I think that part of the story often gets left out. So I am going to talk a bit about that in my own life. I was studying to be a doctor my first 2 years of college. And eventually I realized that that was not what was right for me because I hated all of my classes. I was burnt out and exhausted all of the time. I felt hopeless, unexcited about my future. It was a really rough year, actually, and it kind of culminated in me just absolutely scrapping everything I had worked for. The winter break of my sophomore year of college, which was really hard because I had put all of this time and effort and energy into becoming one thing, only to realize that this was not what I wanted to be. And so from there, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and that was really scary. And I want to talk about how I went from this place of just feeling completely lost to getting to, all right, this is what I want to do, and having a set path in life, I guess. I randomly chose a bunch of classes that sounded neat and filled my requirements based on what I had heard from other students that I was friends with, from what I had taken before. Some of them were not the best classes. If I could go back, well, I probably still would take multivariable calculus, but it was a rough semester. But I'm glad that I did it. And then one of the classes that I chose was Intro to Computer Science. And I didn't start the major until my second 2 years of school. Let's see. Sorry, it just seems like there might be some stuff going on there. I don't know exactly what your school schedule is like, but so that's how I got there. And how I knew it was right is I was excited to do my homework again. And I could picture a future for myself in the field. I was, just excited to do class again. And I had some role models who helped me along the way, and I got some guidance from some great professors, especially my first teacher, Dr. Lainey Strange, and then my second professor, Dr. Megan Monroe. For me, it was the first time that I had seen successful women, and in the case of Dr. Monroe's, successful queer women in the field. And for me, that was the first time that I could see myself going down this path in life. I also had started working in a lab down at Tufts Medical School doing lab research. And I realized that a lot of my job was rote and monotonous. And with my very basic coding knowledge from just the intro class, ended up automating myself out of a job because my job was to categorize, label all of these samples, and I wrote a program to do that. And then my lab advisor took me aside, and she was very kind about it, but she suggested that I pursue that instead of the lab research because it was clearly what I was gravitating towards. So definitely a lot of soul searching. Post-college, I applied to 70 jobs. Most of them ghosted me, I received 2 job offers. And that experience is fairly typical for people coming out of college. And that was in 2019. So before this whole pandemic started. In order to get a job in today's market, you have to be skilled, you have to work hard, and you have to be lucky, because a lot of times people don't even read resumes. But you can make your luck go up by playing the odds often. And so you just kind of have to keep going, keep applying to jobs, keep trying. Even if you are met with rejection or met with nothing, because a lot of places just won't even respond. I guess that's also something that isn't really talked about when we're talking about, oh, how did you get into your dream job? Because this is my dream job. I got really lucky. I applied, they accepted me, and I'm so glad to be here. But it was definitely not sort of this magical fairy tale of, oh, I applied to this one job and they said start right away, and I started working there, and that's how it all worked out. Yeah. All right, getting into more of the day-to-day of what I do. Can you all still see the slides? Yeah? Okay. I get into the office usually somewhere around 8:30 to 10:30 a.m. Tech is great because most people get in when they want to come into the office. You don't ever have to really be there unless you have an early morning meeting. And some companies do have early morning meetings. Like I've heard that Amazon will sometimes do 7 a.m. meetings. And some folks like that because they're morning people and they get it out of their way early on. I am not one of those people. So on my team, folks will get in anywhere between 8:30 and noon, depending on the person. There sort of is this expectation that you will stay at the office long enough to get your work done, which is, an 8-hour day. But when you do that is up to you. A lot of teams will have core working hours and say, okay, well, you need to be here between 10 and 4 or something. And then the other hours on top of that, you can choose. But I usually get in somewhere around here. In the morning, I'll do reading emails. I'll review other folks' code before it goes out. I'll work on writing design documents, and then I'll do some coding. But I tend to prefer to have like a solid block of time to work on that, which is why after lunch and after 1, maybe 2 meetings of the day, I'll get in a solid block of writing code. I'll send that out for review. People will take a look at it. And if it looks good for production, it'll get submitted. If there are things that need to be changed, they'll leave comments, and I'll respond to those comments, and then it'll go out. And that's usually how the process goes. You're never writing code in isolation. You're always working with other people, and you need to, 1, keep them in the loop on what you're doing, and 2, make sure that what you're writing works well within the broader ecosystem of what everyone else is working on. And so there's always going to be some sort of a review process. Yeah, that's kind of what a typical day looks like. Some days we'll have more meetings, some days we'll have no meetings. But for me, I am entry-level software engineer. I don't spend a lot of my day in meetings. As you work up through the field, gain more experience, maybe start taking on some manager responsibilities, you could end up in more meetings. What I like about it, I like the team that I've ended up on a lot. It's a great environment. The people are very supportive. I have both a manager who does, I guess, more of the people responsibilities, making sure that the team is all functioning as a whole, helping me manage my career growth. And then I have a technical lead who manages the technical plan for the team. And I think having those two separated creates a healthy structure for the team, lets people focus on their job, and to do it well. There's a lot of autonomy and trust in my field, both that I have endowed to my coworkers and that they have put in me. So there's some oversight to what I'm doing. I'll send out my plans and my design documents for what I'm going to be working on, and someone's always checking my code before it goes out. It's the same for everybody else. But for most of the details, I get to choose how things get implemented. There's some flexibility in what I work on, and having that autonomy is a really good feeling. That choice in my day about what I want to do. I get to work on interesting problems. It's never going to be the same month to month, year to year. I'll be working on one problem for usually a couple months at a time, somewhere between 1 and 6 months, depending on the size of it. But after that's done, I get to move on to something else. And there's usually some freedom in choosing what I want to work on. Obviously, there are things that just need to get done for the team, and someone's got to do it, and that just gets assigned to you. But but within that scope, I get to have a lot of freedom. And then I can also, see the impact of my work. I'll open up my phone because I do use Google Maps, and I can see what it is that I'm working on, and the changes that I get to make. And that's really exciting. I'm not in meetings all day. I am an introvert. And if I had to do meetings morning to night, I would be exhausted at the end of the day. And so I knew no matter what, I had to choose a field that would let me have downtime. I have 1, maybe 2 meetings a day. The work is straightforward. People tell you what they want, and they tell you what is expected of you. There's not a whole lot of corporate vagary that sometimes you can see in other fields, which I find refreshing. The compensation is not bad. I knew that I was going to have to pay off student loans, so I chose a field and then a job within that field that would let me do that. And this lets me do that. What I dislike, tech as a field tends to be fairly male dominated, and it tends to have a lot of unhealthy working habits. I'm grateful that I've ended up on a team that is inclusive, that I'm not the only woman on, because some previous places that I've worked, I have been the only woman on the team. One place I was the only woman on the floor, but that meant that I got the entire bathroom to myself. So that was pretty cool. And so tech as a field can be a cold place, I guess. But I also just like that my job is very unstructured, both time-wise and what I'm supposed to do. There's a lot of ambiguity, and sometimes that can be overwhelming, especially in this work from home environment. But you all have been doing school from home for some time this year, so I guess you know what that can be like at times, to just be completely alone, working on your own thing. It's been something to adjust to, I'd say. I'm looking forward to going back into the office, but currently I'm still working full-time from home, and that will be for the foreseeable future. Maybe that'll change by the end of the year, but we're not really sure. And between that and having 1 to 2 meetings a day, I don't get a lot of human interaction at work. Again, something that would change if I were in the office, but I see my coworkers for about 15 minutes a day, if that. And that's only, I guess, the 2 or 3 that I work most closely with. And the rest I'm just working on my own. The impact of what I'm working on can sometimes be hard to see, because at the end of the day, it's just code. There's not really a tangible output. I can sort of pull up the app on my phone, but there's nothing really to hold in your hands at the end of the day to say, I did a great job with this. Also, all the things that go around it that aren't coding, that make sure your code goes out to 1 billion users, because that's how many we have for Google Maps. Every now and again, I'll have to be on call, which means if something breaks in the night, there are other people who are in Sydney and Tokyo and Zurich to help with that because they're in different time zones, but I will have to get up and fix it and see what is going wrong and why is this breaking. And that can be draining. And then, yeah, I am now the family tech support. Anything breaks from a printer to a phone, my mom calls me. Sure. Looks like we have a question here. Yeah. What skills do you think will be most important? What certifications do you recommend we work towards? Good question. Let me see. I think, yeah. Starting off with things that skills will be most important. These are the classes that have helped me the most. Formal logic, you wouldn't expect to help, but I think it was more helpful for me than any of the computer science classes I've taken. It is very abstract. It's like a philosophy class, but having those critical thinking skills to work through will help you in any language, any project, and even things just outside of computer science. The CS classes obviously have been helpful. Coding, math, especially discrete math, has been a really helpful skill to have. And English, having good writing skills, and communication skills, especially for technical documentation, has also been very helpful. For the future of the industry, skills and certifications, that is a really good question. I think if you're looking to get a job, get your foot in the door, having some sort of web experience, so coding up an application with a website is going to be the most helpful. From my experience, having a project you can talk about and show off in a portfolio is going to be way more helpful than any certification. So I would say how did I end up at Google? It is like playing for the Yankees. Oh, well, as a Red Sox fan, I'd like to say it's like playing for the Red Sox, but yes. I was reached out to by a recruiter for working as a cloud technical support role in Austin. And I said, wow, thank you for reaching out to me. This sounds great, except I don't want to do that role and I don't want to do it in Texas. And they were actually really nice about it. And so they put me in touch with a person who recruits for software engineering graduates in Seattle is where I ended up working. And I just started through the application process there. It was grueling. I had 3 phone interviews and then a full day of on-site interviews. So 5 hour-long interviews where I was doing whiteboard coding problems, solving solutions and then talking through them with another person. And then after all of that, I ended up in a new grad role at Google. So yeah, I would say you just kind of have to ask. The worst thing that will happen is someone says no to you. Let's see, we got another question here. What was it like being a computer science major? How were the courses like? I went to Tufts University in Medford, Massachusetts. And the courses varied depending on the professor. A lot of them were large because it was a fairly popular major. I liked some more than others. I think the part that I enjoyed the most was getting to be a teaching assistant. I started doing it because I needed money to pay for bills and food and ended up loving it. It was so rewarding, and it also really helps with my interviewing skills. And I think a lot of the stuff I missed the first time around in some of my courses, I definitely had to pick up the when I was teaching it to someone else. Mm, the courses took up a lot of time. They were definitely time intensive, I would say, but it was a good experience for the real world when you have to learn about where is your time best spent, like where does your time have the most impact, because in an ideal world you'd have infinite amount of time to work on something, you'd get it perfect and you'd send it out, but we do not live in an ideal world. You have only so much time in a day, and you have to come up with whatever the good enough code is, or a good enough product. In tech we call that minimum viable product. So I think having classes that took up a lot of time and were grueling helped me, it forced me to learn what is good enough, I guess. Please explain how a philosophy class helps you. Yes, formal logic is a class that technically falls under philosophy, but it's really where computer science itself grew out of. If any of you have ever used coding, you've seen Boolean logic in it. So if this, then that, or if this condition and not this condition, then do this. That is how all programming languages are structured. It's just a series of ands, ors, and ifs. Formal logic is that in its purest form, separated from code. It's helpful for formulating arguments, but it's also helpful for understanding logical control flow. And I think it'll be useful in pretty much every walk of life. It's not like a philosophy class in the sense of thinking about life and what is good and evil. It's not like that. It's like, how can we know what we know and prove it using logic? Yeah. How has what does math have to do with computer science? Great question. Math is computer science and computer science is math. Math is just a language we use to talk about numbers, and to talk about measuring the things in the world around us. And computer science is just that as well, in a specific way. Everything changes so fast in computer science. The languages you learn now will be obsolete in 10 years. That doesn't mean you shouldn't learn them. That doesn't mean you shouldn't learn things. I suggest you learn as many languages as you can. I'll get more into what specific ones, but you're going to have to learn more languages as you go along in your career if you ever want to stay relevant or keep your job. And all computer science languages are fundamentally just translations of math. And the easiest way to pick up a new language is to know the math that underlies them and to understand the fundamental principles at work that are being conveyed with code. And once you can learn, I guess, those more abstract concepts of what you are doing with the code, then you can learn any new language and you'll be able to keep your job and stay up to date and stay relevant. As for what languages I know and what do I suggest to learn, I know Python, C++, C, Java, JavaScript. I know some assembly code. I know LaTeX, if you want to count that. I don't. Haskell. I know Lisp. Probably a couple others that I learned in college but haven't used since. I know a couple of languages that are specific to Google because they decided to have everything internal. How long did it take to learn these languages? What resources did I use? The first language is going to take the longest. And after that, it'll just get easier. I think there are specific families of languages, and you should learn one in each. Let's see. I'll put this in the chat. You should learn at least one object-oriented language and then one scripting language, because those are, I guess, the two families that you're going to want to start out with. For object-oriented, I am a fan of C++, but that's what I started off with. Java is also a great object-oriented language to start with. I think choosing one of those will open a lot of doors for you. Oh, also web languages. Just like HTML, C++, JavaScript. A good place to start would be on your own or with a friend, just making a very, very basic application. So like a very basic website. It'll take a couple months. The first one is always going to be the hardest. But in order to do that, you will need to know HTML, C++, and JavaScript. Or no, it's not C++, CSS and JavaScript. Truly as basic as it gets. But once you have that, it's something you can talk about in interviews. It's something that you can show off in a portfolio. It'll look impressive. It'll tell people that you have the skills to do an application end to end. That is where I would start. Also, a good language to learn, and this is my favorite, and I think it's the easiest language out there to learn, but also one of the most useful, is Python. Python is used for anything from writing backend servers for websites to writing testing frameworks, to, I mean, pretty much anything you want to do in coding, you can use Python to do it. I think it's the one that is best for beginners as well. And the way I actually learned that is through like a free online material course with Google, before I even started working there. Let me see if I have the link. Yeah. I'll put this in the chat. But this is the materials that I learned it through. I think if you want to be a software engineer, you're going to have to learn how to teach yourself. A lot of what you do is just learning on the job. Sometimes they'll give you resources, sometimes they won't. But yeah, but your first language is definitely helpful. Where does project management fall into your skill set? Good question. We have project managers on our team that we work with, and that is all they do day in and day out. Some companies have different paradigms of project management, like they'll do agile or they'll do waterfall, which gives slightly different titles to the people who manage the projects. I would say you should at least have some skills for managing your own work, but project management is a whole skill set in its own. It's why we have people who focus only on that. I am not a project manager and I can't exactly speak to that. I think it's interesting. I think a lot of what you do is just making it so that the people who are doing the work are never blocked in what they're working on. So getting authorizations and permission and cutting through the red tape. It is sometimes a job without glory, but it is definitely a necessary one. Let's see, other questions. Yeah, how long did it take to learn languages? I think for me, it took probably a year and a half of classes to really understand C++ and all that you could do with it. I think there's different levels of like understanding a language, just as there are with speaking languages. You know, you can be conversational in a language, you can be fluent. In software, you just kind of learn what you need to know when you need to know it. How do I structure your time when I'm working on my own? That was something that was really hard for me to learn initially. I think haven't 100% gotten that under control either, but you work with the constraints that you're given. Like, I have to be in this meeting and I have to get this thing done by then. I think breaking up what you're working on into as small of tasks as you can is helpful. And then just going from one of those to the next is useful. I think for me, I've really started using Google Calendar, because that's where all of our meetings are, to block off time to have working hours and to have, okay, this is like when I'm going to do email and when I'm going to do code reviews has been helpful, just like blocking those off on my calendar. I have ADHD, and so for me, coming up with structure for my unstructured time was really a challenge. So I ended up like reaching out to a therapist this year with work from home and getting advice, and that has been really helpful. I think if this is something you're struggling with every day, that is the point where it's good to ask for help. And so having another person to just talk through ideas with, talk through things with, give you advice and guidance can make a world of difference. Let's see. Any other questions? Let's see. Okay. Things that would be useful. I think there are some classes out there and some certificates that you can get. I think 5-10 years ago, folks would have looked at boot camps and certificates like that differently than they do now, but there's more of an acceptance of them within the community. A certificate is meaningless without something to show for it on your portfolio. In the process of earning a certificate, you're going to have to write some code in most cases. And if you're not writing code to earn that certificate, then it's not worth your time. Putting that code into a portfolio is really what's going to set you apart. Most folks host their portfolios on github.com. I strongly suggest you make an account, you check out what other people have put on their portfolios. I have not updated mine in a long time. Don't look at mine as an example, because I've been in this job for 2 years, and so it's fairly out of date. But GitHub comes technology. It's source control for code, and that's something that is useful. If you can tell a potential employer that you know how to use Git, they will be over the moon, because it's something that everybody has to learn. It's not exactly a coding language, but it's something that you use to write code. It helps you save backups of your work, so you don't end up deleting all of your code. I mean, we've all done that, accidentally deleted a file, have the panic. It happens, but Git makes it a lot less likely that that will happen. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. Do we have any other questions? Mm-hmm. All right. If there's no other questions, I just want to say thank you to, do your students call you Mr. Wilson? Thank you to Abemi for putting this together. Thank you to you all for coming and for asking questions and for giving me this chance to talk to you all. Yeah.
I would like to thank you for a great presentation, and hopefully it would be it give our students something to think about and go forward. forward with. So we really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I'd like to thank the other students who are from different schools who participated as well. A big thank you for that as well, for coming along.
Mhm.
I know that some of the other schools were unable to attend and have asked for a copy of this, so I will put that out there for them to see. But thank you so much once again.
Sure. Yeah. And if anybody has questions that they'd like to ask, this is my email. I'm putting it in the chat. Send me an email and I'll respond. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.